Chris Duffin here. I am here with Kelly Starrett. Can you believe this? The two of us together, mobility, stability, and we've got some good discussion I think that's going to happen today.
Yeah, Chris and I have been touching base. I don't know, we've been touching each other tangentially for months now.
Yes.
And finally, the power of the Mark Bell brought us together. And we are West Coasters, which I appreciate. Right?
Oh yeah.
Which is obviously the origination of all good thinking. It's obviously on the West Coast. But no, seriously, this conversation is right time. We're going to get to this. Hang tough, but I think at the heart and the soul of this conversation is what is the new role? What is the role of the strength and conditioning coach, and what should we expect that person to be able to do? Right? That's
Yeah.
really what we're going to talk about.
It is. And it's something that's shifting and changing because, I mean, we look at, how athletes are operating today, and we've got a lot of issues that we need to know when we take somebody to the next level of care. When do I send them to see? When do I send them to see the back specialist? But at the same time, there's a lot of things that we should be assessing and putting fixes in place in a regular position so that they never get to the position where they need that care, right?
Yeah, totally. It's not skilled care. That if you show up and your kneecap hurts when you squat, and your quads are stiff, and you're missing terminal knee extension, your calves are tight, that is not a skilled care issue, right? That should be dealt with by the strength and conditioning coach and by you as an athlete, right? You need to take care of that. Especially if you're sophisticated enough to be doing conjugate cube, 5x5, paleo, back carb loading, right? Like you should be able to take care of your making tissues.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that complicated.
Well, let's get into it first. So, because there's a clear line. There, you say, we were talking earlier, and you said, hey, there's a point where I recognize, I think someone's got something serious going on.
Yep.
How do you know when that point is? Because this is, I think, one of the big issues is that people don't have a template or a schema to even begin to understand, when am I injured? Like, so we haven't even defined injury. In fact, most physios, chiros, athletes can't define injury. We can scale injury once we're injured. That's grade 1 tear, grade 2 tear, grade 3, right? But we don't even have a clear line of when someone's injured. So when are you talking about injury?
I mean, you've got to have a platform. Like, you've got to know, here's the tools I have to apply. Work through them. And if you reach a dead end, don't be playing guesswork. So, I mean, one of the first things we always go to is we've got to watch the athlete lift to begin with, right?
Whoa. You're saying that, that's some context, that's important? Okay, so, because that's a big deal. So we've got to understand what we're seeing. And I think we're getting better. We're saying that in the last couple of years especially, people become way more sophisticated in understanding what they're seeing. It's not just put more weight on the bar and pray.
Absolutely. So one, do we have a movement issue in general? Two, are they able to get in the proper position? Do we have some mobility issues and some other things that, here's some principles. I can go on the, you're the M1 site and go, hey, here's some mobility issues. We can improve the mobility of this, shoulder and get them in a position where now they're not hurting there.
Let me ask this, because one of the things that in the professional sports medicine world, there's very little connection and consilience between understanding that poor positioning causes pain. And for me, that's mind-blowing. That we, and I don't know if it's because a lot of the movement professionals, a lot of rehab specialists aren't actually working and watching people move consistently, but you can't take the human body out of context of its movement, especially out of the strength and conditioning practice, and say, well then, hey, you turned your foot out, your knee slammed in, and that's why, that may be, I don't know why your knee hurts, but it's weird that you turned your foot out and your knee slammed in.
You can't do anything unless you start with how they're moving to begin with. I mean, that's a basic concept. I mean, that's for me, and that's one of the things that I'm really passionate about is helping our strength coaches know how to see deviant movement patterns, what's going on, and go, we've got an issue. Because if you just take it from sitting down, in the office and looking at what the problem is, I mean, you've got to assess the whole body to understand, and start piecing together the pieces to figure out why is that knee causing an issue versus, it looks like we're caving in here, or I can't get the shoulder in position, that's why my tricep hurts. Instead of just sitting here and treating, we've got tricep problems. Let's treat. We were just talking about this with Mark Bell. Tricep, we got to fix this. And really, we've got lack of internal rotation. Which a lot of it, he's got that lat just kind of tacked down really tight on there. That's impacting his scapular mobility and be able to get in position.
Okay, so things we're talking about that you're just kind of throwing out there. This is what our mission to together with all the other badass coaches is we're going to try to really, in the next 5 years, make it so these things are so clear to see in the strength and conditioning world. Everyone needs to be able to identify them. I think we're getting better at making it clearer, right? But what I really appreciate about, when I watch you treat, like I watch you treat Stan, even just seeing you think about
treat might be the wrong.
Right, no. I watched you address Stan's movement restrictions, right? That may have been causing him to not bench 500, right? And I think that's important, semantic, we're going to have to address. We're going to have to figure out what is the language then of this. This is strength and conditioning, right? Which means that it's also, I'm responsible for position mechanics. We are getting better at making it a clear one-to-one, but I can see you work with an athlete, and I know exactly what you're doing. And none of it doesn't feel voodoo-like, it doesn't feel like gimmicky, like it's straight up restoring mechanics. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I think that's where, in this performance side, it's crucial because you're always considering pain as a problem. But really it's about we can't do the things we need to do. And what I have always seen in working with a lot of really good athletes is that when they're moving well, nothing hurts. In fact, they can work even harder and still nothing hurts. It's like an inoculation against dysfunction.
Absolutely. I mean, that's primary one. Is we talked about this a little bit earlier. I mean, I don't want them. I've got my subscription website that covers a lot of corrective issues. They have a lot of things on coaching movement. You've got a lot of great content on mobility work. In the end, if we move correctly to begin with, we rarely ever need. I want them to do the least amount of your stuff and my stuff actually as possible.
Totally.
Let's go into the gym, spend 5 minutes warming up, and let's start training. Because training correctly is that is your prep.
I
rehab.
Couldn't agree more. Right? And what we see is in places like the NFL, athletes will get 8 to 10 minutes to warm up. And what the problem is, we're using our warm-up as a time to try to correct our inefficiencies. Don't have full into rotation, can't put my arms over my head, can't even get to the bar without sacrificing my T-spine.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So no wonder you have to round your back and be pulled because you actually can't get to the bar without rounding your back and be pulled, right? And so,
which then drives our disc issue. Now
now
we lose the athlete for a year, right?
But it's totally fine because it's normal. So, but the key here is saying that once your positions improve, mechanics improve, it takes very little to maintain it.
Yes.
You just have to do a little stiffness once in a while. Why? Because I don't think humans were ever designed to deadlift as much volume as they're deadlifting. We're right. I mean, you can, but in the real world, you're probably not walking with the mass on your backhand, which means it only takes a little input. It doesn't take massive amounts of input.
Exactly.
In fact, let me ask you this, because I want to come back to the injury line, but how much time do you spend today working on your tissues and your positions?
I never want to have somebody doing more than 10 minutes worth of work before a workout.
Do you hear that? 10 minutes, like that's it. Dose response. What we want you to do is spend time training, getting into positions, doing skill assessment work or skill assistance or positional work.
I think this is an area where people also misinterpret like the content that you put out, I put out, the other stuff, and they want to do like 45 minutes worth of prep.
Stop it.
Exactly, stop it. If you're doing that much, there's some basic fundamental issues with probably moving correctly to begin with. You probably don't know how to squat, and you need to fix it.
And we appreciate that, so people are ending up down a hallway on fire, right? And they're and they've been moving so poorly for a long time. And I think one of the mistakes is that we realize that people are having to really dig themselves out. And it's much easier. What I can tell you is that the athletes that move the best spend the least amount of time. Maybe like the Chinese lifters are a great example. They move really well and they do a little smashing on each other. They walk at each other a lot just to restore sliding surface so that volume can go up. But otherwise, it doesn't take tons and tons and tons of prep. I do think that when I see highly inflamed powerlifters, right, who eat like crap, you know who you are, right? 14 things for Taco Bell, right? And
I can't bring to 13, I'm all right.
That's all it's about, dose response and poor warm up, poor cool down, no aerobic work, right? Super stiff, and just put 1,000 pounds on your back, you're gonna get stiff, right?
Yep.
So, but we should be able to program to that, and it should still take more than 10 minutes of monkeying around.
Absolutely.
Okay, so back to injury, because this is an important concept, because one of the things that let's just call it for-profit medicine or sports medicine world is concerned about is that strength and conditioning coaches are handling injuries and trying to treat injuries. So let's define injury. For me, an injury is I can no longer perform my movement or occupy my role in society or do my job on the team.
Right.
So I can't squat, right? If I can squat and I have knee pain, I'm not saying you're injured. I'm saying you have an incident that we need to take seriously, but that's still not an injury, right? Because I know how many athletes are working in pain and around pain, a lot.
Yep. And a lot never actually let anybody know about it because they're worried that they're going to be the traditional response. Well, let's not train and let's do some of these remedial movements for the next month, and then we can get you back to it. And they want to avoid that at all costs.
And they've had an experience where they spent their whole lives strength conditioning, being very serious about it, being very sophisticated about it. Then something happens, get injured or whatever. Then they end up in this rehab hole in a completely foreign language of not hard work, of not assistance, and that doesn't even correlate well, right? I'm laying on the table. You know, there was a meme that showed up on my physical therapy feed. It was like for private PT practice, and it was a person laying on a table like a stick figure, and then the other stick figure was moving their knee around. And I was like, what is that? That's not physical therapy. That's like moving someone's knee around. I mean, and I think that's the one mistake is when we're seeing that the language of strength conditioning isn't congruent currently, or the language of rehab is congruent with that. And so athletes are hiding their problems or waiting until they're very severe because we haven't empowered coaches, we haven't empowered athletes to take care of it.
Yep. Yeah, and we see that a lot. I mean, just I was telling you about, recently at the College Strength and Conditioning Conference, had a bunch of coaches come up and they're like, "That's a great product, but I can't touch that. I'll get in trouble." What's different about that and grabbing a foam roller and having the athlete lay on it? Just another way of addressing some very simple things. If we've got some restrictions, we can deal with it, we move forward. But, if we suspect we've got an AC joint issue or a torn rotator cuff, you're not going to play around with that.
And you can't fix it.
Exactly.
Right. And one of the ways that I think we'll both agree that is that you've taken things off the table. You've gotten into the thoracic spine, you've gotten into the latissimus serratus, you've cleaned up the things that you can clean up, and it didn't improve the problem, right? And that's something we want people to know is that working on your own body and addressing your own tissues and being able to identify what's normal and not normal is part of the strength and conditioning practice. And when you clear those things up and it still has it, then you need to help.
Exactly. Just like Mark, he's got some issues, right? We've got his lats are tapped down. Let's spend a little time loosening those up. Boom. We can alleviate a lot of things that could end up leading to a surgery because he tore his tricep down the road. Right?
He's not going to tear his tricep benching 600 all the time, missing 100% of his inter-rotation mark. And this is twice now that two of your good friends have pointed out you're missing inter-rotation as the problem. And this is I want to say, this isn't a coach's fault or necessarily Mark's fault. Everyone's a product of a system, and they come through. But now we need to put a flag in the sand and say, this is when it changes, and this is what we expect you to be able to identify and see and not see. Because, if you can see the same problem, it's just screaming at you. I see the same problem, it's screaming, and Mark hasn't seen it, which means that we haven't done a good enough job of explaining it to Mark, right? Or Mark's training partners to say, what the hell, Mark?
Yep. Actually, I pulled his training partners in the room while we were going through it yesterday and said, here's what we're seeing, here's how we'd approach that.
Yeah, and that's right.
They need to hold them accountable too.
And they're so if you go to almost any Eastern Bloc training, athletes are touching other athletes, we're afraid to put our hands on them, like athletes like, hey, I'm gristly there, or it's not working right, and someone just grabs you and moves you around. It doesn't even have to be the most skilled. We have more pictures that are sent to us from the Chinese training hall of athletes walking on each other, smashing, there's the gold medalist, smashing the other gold medalist. And it's normal because they know what it feels like and what it should feel like.
And if that doesn't get the response, when you can tell it's tight, I'm not able to get you anywhere. In my facility, I still have an in-house massage therapist that works there. We don't try to take their business away or to have people not go. It's just a point of can we spend 5 minutes doing it in our warm-up and address it? If not, we need to go here. Maybe they need some ART. Maybe they need, whatever that approach is to get that dealt with.
You have done.
And I think people are maybe worried that we're trying to eliminate that. I don't know where the fear comes from.
Yeah, well, I mean, watch someone deadlift poorly, you can have some fear. Not because they're going to get hurt then, but we know you're going to get stiff. And compensate, that's the issue. I mean, how many bad lifts have you seen in your time?
Oh my God.
Did people's necks blow up spontaneously on the spot? No.
No.
But what we know is in the long haul, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Even if tissue restriction, right? Because your body's compensating for some of those positions that, and you know, if you're all turtly and you pull there, you think that's going to affect your bench press? It is, and that's the problem because we haven't been clever enough, or we haven't conjoined the strength training positioning with mechanics.
Yeah.
What we've said is, hey, you know, we're really good at conjugate, and I can do 27 different thousand squats, but I don't understand what I'm doing whatsoever.
Exactly. I mean, we can talk programming theory all day long, but number one, first you got to be moving well. And if you're not moving well, as a coach, you should actually be able to know just from watching that oh, we may have a restriction in the glute, we may have again, you know, this lat issue, internal rotation, we may have. You should be able to see that in the movement.
I'm gonna put a flag.
That's huge for me.
Yeah.
Like if I watch somebody squat, I can tell you almost everything about what's going wrong with their body.
And what I would say is, every master coach I know can see the restrictions in the movement, but the old generation of guys didn't know how to fix it. They would just be like, well, we'll do all these assistance work exercises, a billion drills to try to work around the problem without necessarily ever addressing the problem. One of the people who are doing the best right now is Coach Dan Pfaff out at Altus, which used to be the World Athletic Center in Phoenix. They're going to put about 45 Olympians into the Olympiad this year, but they have what they call trackside therapy, and they treat all their coaches to be able to assess and also do some manual assessment and also some simple soft tissue work as a background, because the athlete comes in and says, hey, I can't do this, or I'm not hitting this, or I can't get into this shape. They can fix it and put it right back out.
That's perfect. That's the process of how it should be working. I mean,
let me ask you something. If you're warming up with squats, and it's nice is that if you haven't seen Chris Duffin squat or dead, you should. It's fun to watch. It's always fun to watch big, strong guys move well. But if you're moving under the bar, you're hot and sweaty, you're building heat, and it's not going, will you fix it between sets?
Yes, absolutely.
You see that? That means because we just found out some information about how we're moving, and then we can fix it.
No, part of the movement is the warm-up is an assessment. Like, and sometimes we may do some simple things too. Like maybe I'll do a little bit of goblet squatting before I go in. Oh, I've got this issue going on here. Boom, jump, work a fix, then go back and go, oh, I'm gonna goblet squat again really quick. Did I make change? I did. Okay, now let's move to our warm-ups. And am I still having this restriction? I might be doing some overhead RT squats to open up because I'm not being able to get in position. I've got a lot of tightness pulling into my on my elbows. That's in the process.
All right.
I'm squatting, fix it, test, back and forth.
That is the heart and soul of what we're trying to do is, we're dividing, and we call this the I3 model. The first is I have incomplete mechanics, and I can work in those incomplete mechanics, but I'm leaving force on the table. I'm not making it about performance, right? When I optimize position and mechanics, I get better expression of force transfer, period, right?
Yes,
I mean, that's ultimately what we're caring about, right?
And I have to go into that all the time because a lot of people that I'm trying to get the word to, right? They're still in their early 20s, and I think it's like you're going to make me safer, get me out of pain. I don't have pain. I'm fine. Well, let's wait a little while. So I'm like, you're leaving performance on the table. Oh, I'm in coach. What?
That's right. And when you can join that for people, I think that's actually one of the things we've found is the most important experience is that when we put athletes in better positions with tissues that move, they express more force. And then the cycle, like it's conjoined. So people suddenly are like, oh, well, I know what I'm doing before I deadlift because it makes me lift.
Yeah. And this is basic, neuroelectric science, right? That if you don't have great core stability or proper joint centration, your body is going to try to protect you. It's going to deregulate so that you can't illicitly, put out the maximal force. So if you take care of those things, get joints in proper position, stabilize correctly, you're going to see not a performance increase. You're going to see what your actual performance is, because before you're basically undertrained.
That's right.
I mean, so we work the stuff and it's like, you're a 400-pound squatter, let's fix it. Today you're a 440-pound squatter, you never knew it.
Yeah, you know, I think it's Dave Tate who said things like, you know, he really likes cleaning up people's technique, which is about cleaning up their position.
Yep.
And seeing the massive gains quickly. You know, you go from, you know, a 400-pound pull to, you know, like you said, 460 just because you didn't sacrifice your spine.
Yep.
People are like, this is amazing. I'm like, well, actually, you were always there.
Always there. But think about that from a performance aspect. I mean, if you were always there and you weren't training to that level for the last 6 months, where would you be at?
Yeah. And this is crucial because we have a bunch of physios who are going to listen to this, and you know, our experience working on the performance side is that position drives performance. That position inoculates us, and the problem is, and we're going to try to drag the rehab staff back, is that we can't necessarily tell us a straight story because, you know, people, I get hammered all the time about posture. Like, people are like, there's no research that posture causes pain, right? And I'm like, well, there is great research that shows that poor posture affects your breathing, affects your ability to pull. I mean, you know what I mean? And I think it's because if we don't scale that conversation up under load and intensity, you can see how you come to believe a certain fallacy about it doesn't really matter if you round your back and you pick things up off the ground. What matters at some point, and at some point, it's easier for us to just teach you to pick everything up off the ground and back flat.
I was just working with a girl earlier this week. Posture, she's rounding at the thoracic, right? She's got no pain with it. No pain due to the posture. But all of a sudden, you know, while I'm squatting and deadlifting, you know, all of a sudden something will happen and I can't walk for a couple days. And this bad, like, neural shutdown. None of the doctors, nobody's been able to figure it out for me. So we worked through some stuff and improved her posture. She was limited in basically thoracic extension as well. But that posture was also, you could see some issues going on in the core because she was compensating with overactive abdominals.
And are you listening?
So we worked on the posture, worked on her breathing patterns and how she used her core, and all of a sudden she's like, oh my God, I could feel it coming today because I could feel the sensation in my glute that I normally feel prior to leading it up. I'm like, well, let's squat, let's see what happens. And no issues. So I'm gonna make sure she continues to report back to me, but the posture did not cause any pain.
Yeah, and that's
squatting and deadlift caused pain.
That's right, and that's why we think it's much easier to teach kids. This is what your spine looks like when you just do simple hinging. This is what your spine looks like when you pick your shoes up off the ground. Because also in that moment of load, when the load is screaming in your head, like I was just saying, you know, I'm doing a little Pavel, you know, deadlift progression, you know, because I just need someone to program deadlift. Right. So one heavy session a week. But I was just doing 5s last week, and I can't hear anything. Like, I'm really trying to hear what's going on with my body, but when I'm doing 5s on deadlifts, tap and go, it's really hard for me to hear anything. And to be sensitive and aware of, hey, I didn't finish that, or I flared, or my lats turned off, or I couldn't, you know what I mean? And that's the problem. It's really difficult for people to hear this and be cognitively aware when they're in lows. And that's why your default position and learned positions and learned responses matter, because that's what you're going to go to.
Yeah.
Under stress, big competition, fatigue, you're going to always default to what you train.
Yep. And that's and there's so many things from that awareness standpoint, and that's where I use like a lot of like the corrective tools. Like I said, I don't want people doing like a whole lot of stuff before they warm up, but there's a lot of stuff to bring postural awareness and to practice some of these positional stuff on your off days as well. And just bring that awareness and that practice, and it just becomes second nature. And that's a big piece of my movement website, which to me I think is really complementary to what you're doing.
I have tried to stay out of the correctives game because people like you are there. Greg Cook is there. Like, we have a bunch of friends who are really, really competent in that, and I'm just like, hey, let's flip your tissue restriction.
Yep.
And by the way, this is also what we think good moving looks like.
And that's.
But I've stayed out because I'm like, look, I have friends who are really good at this, and people confused, and I'm just saying that, like, you just open the joint, you're done, and that's not true.
No, I think the two pieces are, but you can't have proper movement if you're not able to get the joint in the proper position to begin with, right? So you need both of these. They're both together.
Yeah,
but that's
and
my
we also
expertise is on the movement side, and so like I have very little content on what you're doing because guess what? If you need to work on that stuff, go here.
Yeah.
That's that.
You're going to see more and more of this overlap happen where, yesterday one of my strength coaches, who was also DPT, he was working on his snatch, and at the top moment, his glute just shuts down when he comes in, right? So he's pulling too wide because he's looking for stability. When he comes narrower, suddenly he's up in his ankle restriction, and then we improve that, but then all of a sudden, I'm like, hey, you're missing all your internal rotation in your hip, right? Inflection. It's like, how'd you know? I'm like, well, when you hit that spot, you bounce off the wall. The first thing I do is I throw a hip circle on and make him just do good mornings,
right?
A hip circle, and he's like, it looks like when I get to that spot, it's flat. It's like, it's an empty void. I'm like, that's where your brain, and that is the role of corrective exercises, to teach skills and to reconnect those things, right? Skill, position, transfer exercises.
But once we do that, we've got to go back to your snatch and actually ingrain that pattern again, because you've got to have training to stimulate a response, right? It's not the same thing as taking your 60-year-old non-active person and assigning them a corrective. Guess what? That's actually training for them because they're going to see a response from it. Your DPT who actually lifts, it's not going to see any response. That's just going to help him turn on and get it moving in the right direction. But then he's got to go snatch again.
That's right. And this is where we're going to do a better job in the next couple of years of really giving people simple recipes. You're never going to do it as well as Chris. You're never going to do it as well as some of the masters, but you don't have to do it as well. Because you can get 80 to 90%, you're going to fix and nail all the problems. We have to make it so ubiquitous that it's not just more squats solve the problem, because that's not the case, right? Sometimes we have to identify what the movement problem is, and then say, is there a tissue restriction underneath that?
Yep.
Now, you address that there's some ding on us because we don't talk about pain very much, right? Yet, when I watch you work on Stan, we'll put the link on the Stan's shoulder, you're like, hey, let me desensitize this tissue a little bit, right? Can you talk about just how you think about chronic pain?
So sometimes chronic pain is just underlying remnants of some past issues, right? So Stan's been training for his whole life. He's probably been training for 30 years.
He's the strongest human being. He's the most shredded human being.
Yes. So actually, that's what we use a lot of the knowing here is we'll just we can kind of identify if it's something that's just a peripheral nerve sensitization versus a bigger issue that needs maybe I need to refer them out to someone to take a look at. But not just taking care of the tissue restriction, but we're just basically kind of pulling the fascia and the skin and just having a shearing effect. A lot of times that'll clear up some of those issues. It's very simple, easy to test. If you get results, move on. If you don't, send them on to someone else that can dig deeper. But why would I send somebody out for shoulder pain if I can spend 30 seconds, desensitizing the peripheral nerve system and the problem's gone, right? So
you are a competitive athlete. How many, one of the things the beefs that I have seen in the world with some movement, breathing people is people are like, I don't have time for that. I gotta lift and train and still manage my kids, and I can't, I'm gonna tell my wife, if I was like, Juliet, I've got 2 hours of correctives, she'd be like, that's where I'm gonna go. Do you think that we can get all this done in a training session?
Absolutely. So I do this all the time. This is what our coaches do. So our coaching staff works with virtual clients all the time. I mentor a lot of strength and conditioning coaches in college, pro, in powerlifting as well. You should not be spending too much time.
Especially since
take the high hitters, right?
It's very easy. We're not squatting, deadlifting, good morning, benching, pressing, it's not everything every day. There's only so much you're going to get done in a session anyway. Let's focus on those movements.
Yeah. And pick the high hitters. If we've got 20 different things, what's the top 3? And let's work on those. Get them down and move to the next one. Again, if it's beyond your scope, get some help. But you can be amazed at how much you can do, but you should not be spending 45 minutes worth of prep time for 30 minutes of training. You should be spending 10 minutes of prep time. And maybe if you've got a lot of issues on your off day in between, maybe you got 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes at the max at home doing some body weight stuff at home.
And even I'm like, look, that 10 minutes you watch TV before you go to bed. That's what that's for, not the training session.
Exactly. Don't sit on the couch. Get down on the floor, do some work. Do some maybe you're doing some box squats on the couch. It doesn't. Yeah.
Love it. Pavel was. I just saw a thing. He was saying he's like, I don't want to see you stretching at the gym. That's what the gym's for. It's like don't make these soft exercises. Come to the gym with intention to train, right?
Yep.
And you can see that he's not saying don't work out your positions, but he's like quit being all soft and like, come on, let's be serious what we're doing.
So yeah, so anytime we've got like mobility work, what we do is we do that like the day before, the night before, on an off day. Then you come in and you start prepping movement. Now, if you encounter an issue, you may have to put something in between those sets and go, boom, let's clean this up really quick. And the goal is that you've already done that.
Let me just say that one of the things that we do is we talk about either prepping for the next day's movement, or I just train to learn something about myself, so I fix it after
the session,
which means I'm already having my next session.
Exactly.
So I benched, I had a problem with my bench, I fixed some aspect of my bench, and then I benched 2 days later or 3 days later anyway, so it's probably already fixed.
But yeah, if you waited till the next bench session to address it, you're lazy.
You're Mark Bell. All right. So let's wrap. This is awesome. We can talk. I mean, this is so important, and this is the next revolution. This is the next wave of revolution. All my people, we're at Mobility WOD, WOD, right? And
yep.
our library exercise stuff is there. How do people find you? Who need to know who you are?
So our movement website is Kabuki. KABUKI.ms, or you can just go to our main website that's linked there, but kabukistrength.com.
I want to say we had a games level athlete come into the gym recently. She's been having knee pain, deep squatting, especially on the pistol. It's been happening since December. So she's totally sensitized. Like she's got 4 months of just this thing. MRI is clear, back is clear, check. Everyone's miffed. Turns out her quads are so stiff. They're brutally stiff. And I'm like, when I push on her quads, she like barfs and blacks out. And I'm like, well, maybe that's related, right? Because it's connected to your kneecap, right? And I sent her away with your, she lives in Davis.
Yep.
I was like, hey, look, I need you to take this and try to work on this. And but your roller, I love, because I need that geisha roller it's beefy enough, frankly, that it gets what I need.
Yeah, so we sell products that help people do some of this work at home. So we've got the big geisha roller, which is a combo effort between me and Donnie Thompson using this body tippering, but just a passive way of putting some load for, dispersed load for a longer period of time on the tissue. And we see great results in our trained athletic population with it.
Trained athletic population. That's right. So don't be, because like anytime you want to be talking results, just come to our. I finally had to say to all the physios, I'm like, hey, look, you guys in the UK especially, you know who you are. I was like, you need to come and train with us and see what we're doing.
Yep.
And when they come to town, I'll call Chris, or we'll go up to Chris Gym, and then we'll start just slinging problems out, and we'll show us how you're solving the problems. Because if you can get a faster result than we're getting, and actual results, then we'll talk.
Yep. And it's what we found is just really long-lasting results from some of these products, like the geisha roller on that quad. I don't know.
It's easy.
It's very easy.
You can watch. We put Tim Hasselbeck right on it, just smoke. Well, Matt Hasselbeck actually just sat there, and Tim was there, but Matt just sat there and smoked his quads on the top the whole time.
Excellent.
Loves it. All right, kabukistrength.com.
Yep.
Fantastic. We're gonna just take a quick pause, and then I want you to talk about this beautiful thing.
Okay.
All right.